Everyone. Welcome to this tour and on talk, which is a bold, beautiful, and energy efficient at Highfield Avenue. My name is James Rickson, and I will be chairing this evening. The format of this should be about, I'd say, half an hour, so but 29 minutes of Anna now discussing her project, take you through, and then we'll reserve half an hour at the end to answer any questions and have a bit more of a discussion. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Anna to take you through her retrofit and home.
Thank you very much, James. So my name is Anna Pamphilon. I am also the co-founder of Within Planetary Boundaries Studio, which I'm going to tell you a teeny tiny bit about. So this is me, this is James. We founded this studio. We're an architecture practice. James, who you've just been listening to, is a chartered architect, certified passive house designer, level 5 retrofit coordinator, an AECB Carbon Light Standard certifier, and steering group member of ACAN. And myself, I'm not going to read all these things out. I'm those things. And we are a local firm. We're passive house and eco retrofit experts. We champion creative architecture and foster collaborative dialogues with clients. So this isn't really about us, but I just thought I'd show you some very quick slides. I'm going to whiz through quickly of, we do lots of retrofit of domestic and non-domestic. We love using natural materials. That's wood fibre up there. The middle one is external insulation using multi-pore. So we've used lots of different nice breathable insulations. We have done passive house, and we like to think that our USP is that we're very creative whilst having a very high level of technical capability in-house. So moving on, because you're not here to talk about all of our projects. So we're going to talk about actually my house and a retrofit project, which was completed about 6 months ago. So I'm just going to show you lots of drawings, then some photos, and then some videos. And I'll sort of talk, about the various elements as we go through. So on the left, you can see this was the existing plan. And in red, was the initial area to demolish, and on the right were our initial ideas. I'm just going to get rid of all these pictures of everybody so I can see the screen. So on the right were our initial plans in terms of our proposed. So like pretty much every client that I have, I also fell into the same trap, the inevitable trap of wanting to do a million things that I couldn't afford. So initially we'd wanted to do this rather large extension, which was sort of filling in this very dark, gloomy corner, which had a lot of very slimy decking. And the reason for that is that this this box here was a conservatory with a very, very thin roof. It was about sort of 2mm plastic roof. And when you walked into what was the kitchen in the wintertime, it was like just you were walking outside. So it was just sort of a hole to the garden. So it was very, very cold. So thermally, that was an absolute must that we needed to seal that up and create something much more substantial. We couldn't just put on a new roof because the walls wouldn't have taken the weight, so we had to rebuild that. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we couldn't afford to do all of these things, so it either came down to doing the eco measures, insulating, putting in an air source heat pump, and just rebuilding this conservatory, or not doing any of the sort of eco things and just doing our extension. So the can I scroll through? Here we go. Yes, the architect in me. These were the sort of 3D. So this was the initial idea. If you look on the right, the rear, and then what it might have been. We'd also got some plans for a dormer. We knew we'd never do the dormer, but I just thought we'd get planning permission for it anyway, just in case. So what we ended up doing is not doing any work to the upper floors of the house other than externally insulating. as you can see here, and then just rebuilding this conservatory, which was really, really thermally inefficient, and installing an air source heat pump and insulating the floors internally. So in terms of new build, the only area that we were really building anew was the what was the conservatory, which I'll explain a little more as we go through the drawings. So we built that out of wood fibre and timber. So it has a timber frame, 150 millimeters, and it's filled full of soft wood fibre insulation. And then externally, it's clad in 100 mil of wood fibre board, which is fantastic for it. Both stops thermal bridging of the timber frame, but it also does a really good job of stopping overheating, because wood fibre has a very good thermal mass compared to other insulations like phenolic insulations like Kingspan and Celotex, for example. It's also very good acoustically, and to boot, it's really good in terms of breathability. So it's very good in terms of humidity control. So this blue fill that you can see here in this section is the concrete slab of the existing conservatory, which we did not demolish. We kept that. And we did that for two reasons. Reason number one, cost. So it saved about a third of our project costs to not do any groundworks. Reason number two, concrete is pretty evil in terms of embodied carbon. So we set ourselves the challenge to not use any concrete in the making of this refurbishment. I think we pretty much succeeded. There was probably a little bit of cement pointing that went on the existing garage, but otherwise it was pretty low embodied carbon. So all sorts of technical drawings. I did lots of drawings of this tiny little extension just to make sure that we were eliminating thermal bridges. And here it is. This isn't quite finished, this picture, because unfortunately it took a long time for the gutters to come, which I've got a picture of, but I literally have not been able to be in the garden when the sun's been out to take a decent picture. So it's a very gloomy picture. So this is a much nicer picture. It just doesn't have the gutters. So this is it with the blind down, and this is it with the blind up. I now have a little piece of powder coated aluminium which covers this blind, not really so much for aesthetic reasons, because I don't necessarily mind that blind. I would have liked it better if they'd done it in red, but you know, I couldn't get red. So but just to keep the water off, and so that it, you know, it lasts a bit longer. Although it is an external blind, I think it will help its lifespan. So why the red? Well, we wanted to go for a very cost-effective tin roof, metal roof, and it only came in three colors: red, green, brown. Oh, actually it probably came in white as well. So, and the red that it came, I liked the green, but given that our existing roof was already red and all the roofs around, I felt like it would look a bit Christmassy. So, and I thought it was more in keeping to go with red. So that was the color of the red roof dictated the color of everything else. And you can see to the side, that's our air source heat pump. So the cladding is all timber, so that the whole wall build up is timber. So it's timber frame, wood fibre insulation between wood fibre insulation on the outside, plywood cladding, and then we have thermowood battens. We used thermowood because when you have them as thin battens, there's quite a big risk that they could sort of warp over time. Thermowood is a heat modified softwood, so it turns into a timber that's a bit more sort of hardwood like, while still having the lower embodied carbon of softwood. It obviously in the process does make its embodied carbon a bit higher, but it's still better than getting, you know, hardwood or some sort of tropical hardwood, for example. So I wouldn't use a wood like this everywhere, but in this scenario for these little fins, it probably was the right low embodied carbon choice. And other than the sills over the windows and the roof, everything else is timber, including the windows, which are timber triple glazed windows. So they're not alley clad, they're completely timber. And these little metal wires and brackets are for our external blinds, which I shall show you a video of later. So here we are on our Eco Homes tour, which happened on Saturday. So you can see the gutters have now gone in, and we have just something covering the external blind, and there's our air source heat pump there. So there are all sorts of things in the house that I really don't like. Like I don't like this loft extension, and I don't like this garage, and I don't like our UPVC windows. But inevitably on a project like this, unless you're very fortunate to have a never-ending pocket, you have to choose very carefully what interventions it is that you want to do. So it's always really important to start off with a whole house plan, work out where you want to be, and then what bits you can afford now that are going to make the biggest difference in terms of cutting your carbon footprint, and improving your quality of life, and that are not impeding you from making changes in the future. So that's how we chose to do the moves that we did. So at some point in the future, I would like to change these UPVC windows to timber, something much more in keeping with the building, just to make it look, a bit nicer. Likewise for this dormer roof, I'm not quite sure what I'll do with this conservatory, but these windows are not at end of life at the moment. So although the architect in me would like to replace them, the eco warrior within me knew that that wasn't the right thing to do. So it's always this compromise and balancing act that you have to go on this journey. So here on the side of the building, there's our air source heat pump. It's a 5 kilowatt Valiant air source heat pump. It could be 5 kilowatts because we've insulated the house with, just going back to the picture before, we've put on 100 mil of EPS Baumit insulation, and that's made the whole house extremely airtight. Actually, we didn't install an airtight layer internally, but it has definitely improved the airtightness of our building without doubt, because we haven't yet put any radiators on upstairs, because we find downstairs gets hot enough and it's sort of the heat rises, because it isn't escaping on the ground floor, so it's rising, and that's heating the upstairs at the moment. So yes, this is the air source heat pump. I obviously had it wrapped because it had to be red. I couldn't have a white air source heat pump. I find it very quiet. Well, I'm sure we'll have lots of questions about that later. And we have these single room MVHR units that we've put into the kitchen and the living room, and also one in the bathroom. I would have liked to have done a whole house MVHR. For those of you who don't know, that's mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. And the reason that that's so great is that it is constantly providing fresh air whilst ensuring that you're not losing your heat. So it takes out stale air, but it extracts the heat from that stale air, and it heats up the incoming colder air with that stale air. So it's a very efficient system. It uses very little electricity to run. It is running constantly, so it's really ensuring that you have a good air supply, and it controls humidity, which is particularly important when you're insulating your house. So yes, at some point I'd like a whole house MVHR installation, but these single room fans seem to be doing a fairly good job. They're definitely noisier than a whole house, but I don't find them a problem. And they're certainly better than nothing. And it meant that I didn't have to put trickle vents in my lovely new expensive triple glazed timber windows, which was great. You do, word of warning, you have to drill a much larger core hole than a standard fan, of which most contractors can't do. So you'd have to get a specialist in, but it's not a particularly expensive thing to do. And there's, would you know it, lots of people in Cambridge who do that very specific thing, just go around drilling big holes. So it's quite easy. So this is the what was the conservatory on the inside now. I've had lots of comments asking me when it's going to be finished. This is finished because I'm a ridiculous architect. This is the finish that I want, the exposed OSB. I love its industrial feel. It feels really cozy, and it feels like you're in a tree house when you're inside, which is really nice. So this is it here. We have these great convection radiators which are linked to the air source heat pump, installed by they were invented and produced by the air source heat pump installers who are called Conga. I think if you go to the Eco Homes website, you can get the PDF about this project, and there's all the links to the manufacturers and contractor that we used, etc., who was Green Hat. So these are great because they take up the space of about a quarter of a standard radiator to produce the same heat. They suck the cold air in, they're not blowing it out, they're sort of sucking it in, and then the warm air is pushed out the back of the radiator. Because I was quite worried about putting plants near it, thinking, with a normal sort of standard boiler and radiators, if you put a plant too near, they get burnt, don't they? But so far, they seem to be completely fine in such close proximity with the radiator, so all good. And you don't really hear them, they're very quiet, very efficient, so they're great. And this is the kitchen, which we did a sort of very light remodel of next to the dining room. And we showed everyone our new triple glazed front door, which unfortunately you can't see in person. So the pros are it's lovely and warm, it looks great. The negatives are it is very heavy and quite hard to open and close. So I think that's definitely worth bearing in mind if you think that's going to be an issue. So if you are thinking of a triple glazed timber door, I think I was a little bit greedy with the width of my door. I went for a very wide 900 door. In retrospect, 850 or even 800 would probably have been fine, and that would have helped just keep the weight down. And our wall to either side is actually a pretty thin brick wall with the brick stood on end, bizarrely, and I think I could have done with making that wall a bit beefier so that it could really withstand the weight of a very, very heavy door when you're kind of slamming it shut. It obviously is externally insulated, that wall, but that's not going to add any sort of mass to the wall to help with that. So there are sort of pros and cons. I do love the door, but my kids find it really hard to open. So this is the kitchen. This is me showing everyone the MVHR unit there. And that's us all having a little chat around the table. We've still got our Halloween decorations up. And this is our front door from the outside. I found it really important to try and include little details like this, the recessing of the arch, because I think when you externally insulate and keeping all the foliage, because when you externally insulate, you can make the buildings look very sort of monotone and a bit ugly. Again, don't like my windows. But when they are, when one day they're, at the end of life, and we put in nice sort of in keeping timber windows, then I think, it'll look quite smart. So, and yeah, I like having the foliage, and I like making sure you have little details like this sort of ridge in the external insulation and around the doorway. So now I've got some videos which I'm going to not do in the slideshow because the resolution is not very good. So bear with me while I open these up. So the first one, into full screen. There we go. James, tell me if you can't see that or something's going wrong. So you can see we're taking you around the dining room here, which you probably got a pretty good idea of from the pictures, the pitched roof and the roof lights. They're just normal Velux roof lights. That's our triple glazed patio door. That's our fern garden, which would have been, the infill extension, but I love it as a fern garden. It's very little at the minute, but hopefully next year that'll be a jungle. So yeah, that's a really nice thing to look at. That's our convection radiator. So it gives you a slightly better idea of what that looks like. Another one on the other side. Again, don't seem to have any problems with it being next to the plant. And I'm showing you this room again for some reason. Hopefully I'll move around. Oh yes, we have a window seat there. The cover of which was made in Ukraine by chance. Oh, I'm going to open the window now, I think. Yes, there we are. So they're tilt and turn, inward opening windows. And then I'm going to go through to the kitchen. There's another, we've got another one of those radiators on the wall. This was an existing sort of lean-to. So again, just to save money, we didn't sort of demolish anything. We just put a new roof on and put a couple more Veluxes, so sort of mimicked. And the step up is because it was a concrete floor. We couldn't insulate underneath, so we put phenolic insulation on the top, which meant that we had a step. This is the new front door, which I love. I love the circle window, which is in keeping with a lot of other doors on the street. So that was an original style of the doors on our street. We did very little internally, otherwise, other than we've put a secondary timber floor down to cut out all of the drafts. We've insulated underneath the floor in the kitchen, but not the living room, just because we totally ran out of money. This is the MVHR fan in the living room. It's a Blauberg Maxi. We were told we probably should put 2 minis in the living room because they're quieter, but we've found the one Maxi absolutely fine. I've never noticed the noise. So let me show you the other videos if I can. Yep, okay. That one. That one. So video number 2. Oh no, let me just the volume off. View. Full screen. So this is going from our utility space out, of which we did very little in here. We just put in a bit of OSB storage and painted a door green just to try and spruce it up a little bit. And this is our air source heat pump, which we were all really worried everyone would park their bikes on, but those stones seem to have done the job perfectly. And then we put in a couple of posts opposite so that if someone is desperate to leave a bike somewhere, you know, one of our teenagers, they're not going to park it onto the air source heat pump, but instead use the little timber posts. I've done lots more planting so that my neighbour won't ever hear any noise, but she hasn't said she's heard anything so far. I plan to do a lot more planting at the front. I'm going to increase that border by about 3 times, I think, and that's my fern garden, which I'm in love with. And yeah, and our lovely sliding windows. Well, that's me walking around with a pink coat in the garden. And a very, very scary looking sky this morning. There we are, it was gloomy, wasn't it? Okay, so that's video number 2. Then video number 3. Oh, this is the blind, very exciting. View, enter full screen. Okay, so I'm going to show you the blind working now. So this is a manta blind, which, oh, I suppose maybe you want to hear it. It's very quiet. There. And I will turn that off so I can talk to you. But so I would say it's not the best blind in the world. I've done much better external blinds on other projects. I've used a company called Caribbean Blinds who do like little they're basically sealed on the side, so they're much better fitting and they don't have this terrible frayed fabric along the edge, but they are about 4 times more expensive, so we just simply couldn't afford them. So this, you know, does a perfectly good job, and yeah, I mean, it's great for the money, but definitely there are better ones. Then if I show you from the outside, I think that's quite nice to see how that works. Okay. Again, this is going up, and so they sort of travel along these steel wires, and then I designed these like little covers for them to sort of hide into. It's quite satisfying watching them go up. And it ping, and it goes right to the edge. Look at that. Perfect. You can hardly see it except for the wires. Okay, and then escape on that one. That one. Oh, and you can hear my air source heat pump, which was running this morning, so I thought you might like to hear that. As you can hear, you can only hear the wind. Yeah, so you could barely hear it. That's basically the point, that it's mostly sort of the wind and the birds. And you can hear it as you go past, but I think, a neighbour is going to struggle to hear it, especially if you do a bit of planting. So this is my last video, which is just showing you around the front. So you saw our electric charger there. Our front garden's a bit of a disgrace. I need to do some planting. That's next year's job. I've run out of energy. I'm going to get something to get all that concrete up and do lots more planting. And then let me go back to the slideshow. I'll just see if there's anything else to show you. So we've done the videos. We've done those videos. 1 second. Ding. Done that one. Done that one. And that one. Ah, here we are. So that's the last one I want to show you, which was I did a little tally of the costs of the air source heat pump versus the gas. So I've had a meter put on our air source heat pump. So this is extremely accurate in terms of how many kilowatt hours it's used and what that's cost us compared to what we were spending on the gas. And so it's a pretty like for like comparison, because obviously the gas was used just to heat the water up and to heat the house. Okay, we did also use it for a hob, but I mean, I don't think that's going to skew the figures very much. So at the minute, we're spending roughly half what we were spending on our air source heat, on our gas for the same months last year and the year before. But we're actually on a British gas tariff, which is not the best tariff to be on. So I think if we were to move to a Octopus Cozy Homes or they've got other tariffs, we'd find that we could cut our costs yet further. So hopefully it will be substantially under half what we were spending. Obviously, we have spent a lot of money insulating our house. So yes, thank you. I think it is now time for questions. I might stop sharing so that I can see everyone. Yeah. So how is this going to work? Nicole, do you have any questions in the chat?
Hi, sorry, James, were you going to respond?
No, I'll leave you to it.
Okay, we've had quite a few questions in chat, which James has very kindly answered. There've been quite a few sort of technical questions, specifically about sort of models and makes. So I'm sure that's already covered. So I'd like to first invite. Someone signed in as Stickley in Mansfield. Would you like to unmute and ask your questions regarding the MVHR and the noise?
What was the front door expensive to install?
Well, it was the window and door manufacturer, they installed it, so it was all part of their costs. And yes, it was expensive, and terribly I can't remember how much it was, but I mean it was definitely in the region of £1,000, that front door, or probably a bit more.
Okay,
it was expensive. Yes.
What brand was it?
It's not a company that is very well known. They're called Durable Windows. They make their windows in Ukraine. They make amazing windows. They're good value, but their customer service is really bad.
Okay.
It's really, really difficult. So yes, that would just be my word of
So
caution.
you said the MVHR units were quiet, but how much external noise do they emit?
External noise, the MVHR units, I don't know. I've never stood outside and listened to them. Certainly not anything I've ever noticed.
No. How much noise from outside comes in through the hole in the wall?
Oh, I see what you mean.
So if you have noisy neighbors, what happens?
Well, I've never heard any noise from outside coming through the wall. They're very well insulated. So I don't think that would happen, actually. And also I think because they make a bit of noise themselves, that would mask the noise from the neighbours. But yeah, they've got lots of insulation within them. And I went for Blauberg, which are a very good model. So they're about £400 for one unit, but you can get even better ones And now I've forgotten the manufacturer. I don't know, James, if you can remember the other manufacturer that I was looking at for MVHR.
I can't, sorry, not off the top
No,
of my
don't
head.
worry.
And you did this to me on the tour as well, so I should have
Oh,
written it down at
sorry.
that point.
I should have looked it up. Anyway, there are better ones, but they're, you know, twice the price, and you need something crazy like a 300 mil hole drilled, which I was not comfortable to drill that size of hole in a retrofit. So I think they're probably more suitable for a new build. So I felt that the Blauberg were a good compromise on cost, function, and yeah, just the size of hole out to drill.
Sending us a copy of the chat at the end.
That's up to Nicole. Will you be sending a
Yes.
copy of the chat at the end? Yes.
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 Okay.
In the follow-up email, there will be we'll follow up with all sort of a summary of the chat and any answers in there and all the links. So you'll certainly get that.
Yeah, and remember, if you go to the website, you can get the PDF, which I think James has included the link in the, or Nicole has, and it's got all the links to all the different, you know, like the type of fans we used and the type of blinds we used, etc. So it's all there.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
That's great, thank you. Next, I'd like to invite someone who signed in as Mama, please, to follow up with your question regarding the installation.
Yeah, sorry. Clearly, I'm still had to reinstall Zoom, and I don't think I've had it in line since COVID. So there you go. That was clearly displaying my COVID functionality. So I think, yeah, I mean, it was just a question you were comparing. I think you were comparing. Asked a couple of questions in the chat. One was answered already. Thank you very much. And I suppose the other one was you were kind of comparing costs, running costs, and I just wanted to kind of just add a note of caution. I guess it's very obvious to you, but just to other people that are kind of joining, really you've done two things. You've gone off gas onto electricity, but you've also insulated your home. So I guess both of those things are changing the running costs, and it's actually the introduction of insulation that's reduced your costs.
Yes,
that's all I just wanted to say.
Yeah, which I hopefully I did. That's what I said, that we have obviously insulated our house, and I think I would not have put an air source heat pump in if I hadn't insulated the house, because I would be worried that we'd be spending an awful lot of money. I mean, it's possible though that it may not have been much more than we were. James has put an air source heat pump in his house, which you do have cavity insulation, don't you, James? But you didn't do any further insulation.
No, not yet.
And you're spending a bit less than you were on gas.
Yes, that's correct in our situation. But ours is a 70s house. It's reasonably airtight, although in the cold winter we do notice where it's not airtight. But and back on your house, can I ask to follow up from that last question, if you've changed your behavior or your heating habits in your house, and if you've noticed it?
Well, yeah, we
There being a
probably
lot of
heat
water.
our house more, basically. I think we were much scroogier with our heating before. So both my husband and I work at home a lot, so we would never have the heating on in the day. In the week, we would sit there in our coats and jumpers and gloves and hats and scarves, because it just seemed completely insane to heat the whole house when we were working in one little tiny room. So that's actually really nice, not having to. It still feels wrong, you know. I feel like I'm doing something really wrong environmentally, because I'm not sort of, you know, shaking hideously when when I'm at home on a weekday. And the same at night time, you know. Obviously we would have our heating off. We'd have much bigger extremes of heat. So and I think in the inverse, we got used to the evenings being really hot in the sort of when in the colder months, because we'd put our radiators on, you know, at 5 p.m. and they'd go off at 8 p.m. or something, and it would be a bit like a sauna, you know, and then it would be like a fridge. So it's just, so instead we're sort of getting used to. I'm gradually putting the thermostat down. I have this very difficult problem that my husband's actually Iranian, so he likes to be like tropical, and I like to be really quite cool. I think my kids are kind of the same. So we have a lot of arguing about it's boiling, it's freezing, it's boiling, it's freezing. But I think just we're all getting used to this much more steady temperature, which is nice. Is once you get used to the fact that you're not going to feel warm standing next to a radiator, but you shouldn't feel cold walking around. And what's also nice is that because we've now externally insulated, we don't get those feelings of drafts that we used to have before. I don't know if has that answered the question, do you think, James?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. Which actually ties in very well with the next question from Sheila and Neil, which is what was your airtightness figures before and after, and did you do any intermediate tests on the way?
So the awful truth is I didn't do an air tightness test before or after, and I really kicked myself about that. I had booked someone in, and then I don't know what happened to them. I think they were ill on the day, and then I hadn't left myself enough time before they ripped the conservatory out. And then it just never happened. I intend to do one now, but it's not going to be very useful because I haven't done a pre. And by the way, with my conservatory, that did get reused. Someone came and picked it up. I sold it on, well, gave it away on Gumtree, and they've rebuilt it in their garden. So that's quite nice. But yeah, so I haven't done an air tightness test. All I can tell you is it is definitely more airtight because the heat doesn't seem to escape. In fact, we quite often do have to open a window in our top bedroom because we find that the heat just sort of goes up and just stays, just doesn't go anywhere. So yeah.
Can I follow up about the air source heat pump? So I think someone was asking about noise, and I mean, did you find it disruptive at all? Have you had to change your behaviour as a result of relying on that for your heating now, as opposed to gas? I mean,
in terms of the noise, no, because I suppose mostly it's on a lot more in the winter when you tend to have your windows closed, so you don't hear it. You do hear it when you walk, when I go out of the utility and I walk past it to get my bike or go into the garden, but that doesn't bother me. I mean, we were talking about this actually on the tour. In terms of the most annoying, noisy thing to do with our refurb, it would be our new fridge. It's so noisy, and for a new fridge, it really annoys me that it's so noisy. But I think someone was saying on the tour that we just think, oh, it's totally fine for a fridge to be noisy. That's fine. That's what fridges do, But for an air source heat pump to make a noise, well, that's outrageous. They've got to be really quiet. So I think we have this weird sort of, standards of one thing's allowed to be noisy and another isn't. I mean, obviously, I think it would be really bad if it was disturbing my neighbour. And I think she's the sort of person who would definitely tell me if it was disturbing her. So I haven't had a single text about it. So I think it's all right. I mean, I thought that it was noisier than I expected it to be outside because, everyone says, oh, they're virtually silent. Well, they're not virtually silent. Yes, you can hear them as you walk past, but it's pretty quiet and it's not an offensive noise and they're not on all the time. So
that sounds very manageable.
Yes.
So I suppose it's partly about setting expectations, really, then.
Yeah.
Can I turn to, I think Jennifer's got a really interesting question about the external EPS.
There's been lots of reports recently of problems with condensation under the fitting of EPS to external walls under the government's Eco4 scheme. Have you had any problems with any condensation in the house?
Well, I suppose it's a bit early for us to say, really, because it's only been installed about 6 months ago. Right. All I can say is the person that's installed it has done a lot of them before, and I am very confident he did a very careful installation. And we're making sure that, I mean, that's not quite the same. The issue has been that they haven't sort of properly sealed it from the outside. So the water, it's not to do with humidity inside causing the issue. The issue is that I think in these installations you're talking about, there were sort of gaps around the windowsills and sort of at the top of the insulation. So water was managing to get in from the outside in. So yeah, I feel like it's been a very good installation. So hopefully I won't have any issues, but I will obviously be keeping an eye on it. And I've made sure all my gutters are clear and that there's still an overhang, and that we've got new windowsills that, you know, definitely overhang the insulation. And the render's very sort of solid and secure, and there's no gaps.
Cool.
And when they were putting the insulation in, they sort of foamed between the boards as well. So it was very, very, you know, solid installation.
Can I comment on that as well,
Yeah.
Anna? Because I'd say it's or particularly about the Eco 4. I think it's down to detailing and budget. So I think in Anna's case, I think as she's described, there was a lot of effort has gone into and thinking about the detailing, because that's where it can go wrong. And the Eco 4 scheme has suffered from that. I think the whole industry has had to learn these skills, and the way that the Eco 4 scheme has been financed, you've only got a set amount of money per installation. So there's a lot of shortcuts that have to be taken, and particular care can't be taken, such as where single pitch roofs have a junction with the external wall, or gutters and eaves, and again they're quite common ones. And then that's led to gaps, and that's led to cold spots, and then that's led to the condensation. Then the other thing that Anna's that Anna's done very well in the house is a ventilation strategy, and a very good ventilation strategy. So that's that's the hand in hand, and often the unsung hero in all of this, as this in the retrofit as well. You've got to have a ventilation strategy, and Anna's taken through the two MVHR units you have.
Three. I've got three. I
Three.
put one in the bathroom as well. I want to put more, and I think I will put more in the bedrooms, because I've been testing as well with little humidistats around the house, and I've definitely noticed that it's as lower humidity nearer to the fans. So I think they are working quite well. So I think I would like to install a few more around the house, because it's, like I say, it's, although a whole house MVHR system would be better, I know that, but it's just so hard to get all the pipes to work in our house, and it would be another, sort of £8,000 or so, which we don't have. So, yeah.
Yeah, we had a problem with condensation. We've got about 1,800 houses, and we had lots of problems with condensation. We couldn't fit external EPS or ESP rather. EPS.
EPS.
EPS. So we then started looking into passive house ventilation, because we had a spare chimney.
And
that seems to have worked quite well.
So that would be MVHR then?
No, it's just basically we got ventilation within the walls, within the windows, and we use a redundant chimney with a fan on the top of the chimney to actually extract the air, and that's actually reduced. And they call it passive house ventilation, but it actually reduced the amount of condensation we're getting in the house.
Oh, fantastic. You have to put a link to whatever it is that you have in the chat for everyone. But another thing to say is, if you can't externally insulate, I've done a lot of projects. We've done a lot of projects where we've internally insulated, and when it's solid masonry, we do tend to favour breathable insulations like wood fibre, because there's much less risk of condensation between the two. But that's not to say that there's never a place for phenolic or something else. I've used aerogel, but that's incredibly expensive, but that is very thin. So there's sort of the right product for the right place, but wherever we can, we'd always start off with a breathable, low carbon insulation if we do it internally, and ideally externally. I don't think I said on this, but I really wanted to externally insulate with wood fibre, but our quote to externally insulate was £45,000. So we couldn't do that. Our quote for using EPS was still very expensive, so it was £19,000. But we do have a detached house. There's a lot of walls, so if you have a semi-detached or you're terraced, then obviously you're going to be spending a lot less. Yeah, it's not cheap. And so in terms of payback, goodness knows when we'll break even on that one. You know, I think it is still really something that just those who can afford, who are bothered about carbon footprint, unless you are lucky and you get a grant, are doing, which is obviously wrong, because those who benefit the most at the minute are not able to afford to do it. So yeah, but that's the situation we're in at the moment, thanks to the government.
Thank you.
Thank you for that information.
On a lighter note, there's
sorry.
another question.
That's really gloomy, sorry.
There's another question which is, I think, equally as fun, which is, does your air source heat pump cool?
Does it cool? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I do have a really bad habit of sort of going down a really gloomy wormhole. Do not do that. Does it cool? Yes, it does cool. I haven't used it though. So it has the cooling chip. I don't understand why they don't all come with a cooling chip, but apparently you have to sort of, when you buy your air source heat pump, you have to make sure that it does have the cooling chip in it. And our fan convector radiators can also provide cooling. I didn't want to use it this year because I was just really keen to compare what we were spending on the air source heat pump compared to gas. And I felt like if I used it for cooling, it was just going to completely, you know, skew all the figures. And also, I didn't really need to use it because, very interestingly, the house didn't get as hot this year. The room that used to be boiling was obviously that conservatory, which was either freezing or absolutely boiling. And thanks to the wood fibre, I think it's obviously done a very good job of keeping that pretty cool in the summer, which is extraordinary given that it's got a very inefficient surface to volume ratio. It's got a lot of external walls and one side is south facing. And then for the main house, I think the external insulation has done quite a good job of keeping the heat out, and maybe also because it's slightly extended the recess around the windows, and that's provided a bit of shading. We have a funny situation where we do have some existing internal insulation, which old 70s owners were amazingly innovative because they internally insulated, not everywhere, but in bits. But the downside of that means that you don't have the thermal mass internally, which is quite nice. What tends to work very well with solid masonry, if you externally insulate, but you've still got the masonry, so the thermal mass of the masonry internally, then that really helps sort of stop overheating. So I was worried we would have a bad case of overheating in the summer, but it was definitely better than it had been the year before when we hadn't got our external insulation on. So yeah, which was good.
Can I ask about the blinds? So I know in recent years it's been really fashionable to have sort of blinds within the windows. So it's actually set within the two or three sort of panes of glass. You've chosen to have an external blind. What's the principle behind that?
So I've never used a window with shading within it because I've always found that they've come back at more expensive than getting a normal triple glazed window and an external blind. And I think an external blind, well, I know an external blind is more effective because it's, if you stop the heat from coming in, at all, if the blind is outside, that's going to be doing a better job than a blind that's inside the window. And I can't help feeling that there's more things to go wrong, and the repairability of that window is like even more of a nightmare. So I initially wanted shutters, which I think would have been even better than blinds. And at some point I might go back to that, you know, might get a lovely carpenter to put in some nice timber shutters for me. It didn't end up happening because it all got a bit, you know, difficult and stressful at the end, and our sliding window can only open from one side, so I then couldn't put my hand around and close the shutters. But I think shutters are brilliant because they also keep your building nice and warm in the winter. So if you look at the continental style of windows where they have shutters and inset screens and then internal windows which tend to be inward opening, I think that's a really fantastic system actually. So hopefully that answers that one.
Yeah, I think that chimes in, I think, with one of the questions that just came up. Why did you choose blinds rather than shutters that they use in Europe? Like,
yeah, Yeah.
sector.
Yeah, I mean, it just basically, cost. It was more expensive to put shutters in.
So sorry, the question was specifically around roller shutters. Is that also true around cost rather than like timber shutters?
Well, probably yes, compared to the roller blind I put in, because it was, quite a cheap system. So yes, I think you'd struggle to find something other than maybe if I'd just done hooks and just literally, which is what I would almost did, was just got some some fabric with some eyelets so that you could just sort of put it up in the summer, which I have done on some projects where people really don't have money to put in external blinds. We've just designed in little kind of hooks, and then they've just made some fabric up with some eyelets, and then in the summer months, when it's really boiling for a few weeks, they just put them up and they leave them there, for a few weeks, and then they take them down. And that's such a cheap, simple way of shading your building that works really well.
That's on total cost of A, conservatory, and then B, everything else.
Oh God, I wish you'd asked me this a while ago. I could have given you really specific. It's amazing how quickly you forget, isn't it? Well, the whole thing was 120, so I don't know. Basically, I think it probably was about 40 for the conservatory, 30, 35 for the conservatory, 35,000, something like that, I would say. Which, bear in mind, it was only that because we had no groundworks. So it was just, the frame, and I did end up having to pay the builder a bit more for the internal finishes because, I'd sort of banged on about how I was just going for really cheap OSB, but of course, being an architect, I was a fusspot and I wanted it to be done really nice and neatly, which takes a lot longer than if you just bash some plasterboard up there and skim it and paint it. So I did agree that I had to pay a bit more money if I wanted that sort of finish, but that was worth it.
Can I ask about the individual MVHRs? I mean, I think most people in the ideal scenario would go for a whole house. What are the benefits and challenges you found with individual units of MVHR for the different rooms that you've installed it in?
So I'd say I'll give you the negatives and then the positives. So the negatives of single room MVHR is that they're not as efficient, so they don't do their job as well. So they're not going to be extracting as much humidity. They are not going to be probably as efficient in terms of extracting as much heat out of the stale air going out of the building. But if you look at their statistics, which I'm a little bit dubious of, they're something like 90% as good as some really good MVHR whole house units. I personally don't believe that they are quite that good, but even if they're 70% as good, that's still pretty good, So, that's one negative. The other negative is on a whole house MVHR unit, you've got one set of filters you're cleaning. With individual units, you've got to clean the filters on each unit. And I have just done my first clean of the filters. It was incredibly easy. You just pop the front off, take the bit of, foamy stuff out, clean it under the tap, let it dry overnight and put it back in. So I was really scared of doing it. It was really easy. The one I've put in the bathroom stopped working a few weeks ago. And so I rang them up. Another reason I use Blauberg is they have quite a good technical line. So they're really good on the phone. So I rang them up and they talked me through how to take it apart on the wall, to pull the whole sort of unit out. And then you could see the fans. And it turned out that a spider had got the most amazing spider's web in the fan. I mean, it was like the thickest spider's web you've ever seen, which meant the poor fan couldn't turn around. But it was so easy. You just pulled it out, gave it a little hoover, put it back, and bong, it was working again. So I think it does involve there's a bit of maintenance, but it wasn't that difficult and it didn't take very long. I don't like doing anything that takes very long. I won't cook a meal that takes more than 10 minutes. So, it was fine. Even I could manage that and I didn't get too huffy and puffy. So that's the negatives, and the positives are that it's cheaper. I think I know that everyone was saying, oh, but it's not really, by the time you drilled all the holes and you bought all the units, but it is cheaper. It's definitely cheaper. So you know, if you're looking at £400 per unit and it cost me £200 to get the person to come around and drill all the holes, I'm sure if he'd drilled more holes he probably wouldn't have charged me much more money. And he was very quick. So, and you're not left with lots of pipes all over the house, and it's very easy to install them just sort of in stages in your retrofit. So, and they are meant to talk to each other in the system. I haven't got that working properly yet, but I just simply haven't had time to sit down and, you know, get all technical with it. But I'm hopefully I will do.
Sounds great. I think we've got one more follow-up question on EWI.
Yep.
Yeah, did you have any issues joining the EWI to the insulation in the roof? We were at a talk out in Milton a couple of days back, and they did not extend the roof, so they had problems joining the roof insulation to the wall insulation.
Yeah, well, we're doing ours in stages, so we haven't done our roof yet. So they sort of stuffed it up a little bit behind the eaves. And we know that when we redo our roof, which we will have to do at some point very soon because the tiles look extremely precarious, that we'll have to link that up. But we haven't had any issues at the minute. It all looks, you know, pretty
Will you
good.
have to extend the rafters so that there's a greater projection over the EWI?
We're so lucky that we didn't have to do that, you see,
Okay.
because we already had a really good overhang. So
Right. Okay.
yeah, we didn't have to do that. When we do redo the roof, I would like to put a tiny bit more overhang on it because that would just make me feel happier. But it is absolutely fine as it is, you know. Yeah.
Okay.
There is one other question about air source heat pump.
Yeah.
I don't know who wrote that, if you want to ask it.
Shall I look down?
It's Jennifer's husband's, but the idea you're on mute, Jennifer's husband.
David, I should have
David.
Yeah, lots of places, us included, don't have room for air source heat pumps. So looking into alternatives, one of the alternatives would be an electric combi boiler with traditional radiators. Is that a consideration?
Oh gosh, sorry, I haven't used an electric combi boiler, so I don't think I'd be best placed to answer that. Do you have an answer to that, James?
I've got a brief one. So, well, we'll say brief in terms of knowledge base, but I think if it was a direct electric boiler, you know, if you're using electricity to heat immediately as you go, you are not getting the benefit of the air source heat pump, because for a kilowatt of energy that is put into an air source heat pump or a heat pump, you'll get 3 kilowatts of heat out. So that's a real driver to, if you can have an air source heat pump over direct electric, that's where your savings would be in the heating side of things. Having said that, there are, you know, if that is not an option for you, there are brands that I said that there's a lot of brands out there, but one that I'm aware of at the moment is a Tepio, which acts as a thermal store. It's a TEPIO or something. If you Google it, it'll correct you and you'll find it. But Tepio, so it acts as it heats up overnight. Oh, sorry.
Phase change boilers, I think they are.
Yes, yeah. So they heat up overnight and act as a thermal store, and then heat your water that way. So that's a good option.
Right. Okay. I'll keep quiet now.
Sorry, Wookie, someone coming to the room. What things to say in the wrap up? So yes, so can please help us all by filling a short feedback form, which will appear when you leave the session. That's really helpful for the talks. Also, please, donations. So thanks if you've already donated to the charity Cambridge Carbon Footprint. which run the Open Eco Homes, but please consider donating to them again to enable them to inspire more people to make big changes to cut carbon. Upcoming events. Is that a link on there in the next step? But yes, again, check with Cambridge Carbon Footprint for the up and coming events, and just say thank you very much. And that's the end. Hope you've enjoyed this presentation.
Yeah, that's the last slide. Thanks everyone for coming. Bye. Good luck with your eco refurbs.